The term golden generation is thrown around very loosely nowadays, with many national teams being given the label despite winning absolutely nothing. Welcome to Halftime Football, where today we'll be looking at 8 golden generations who failed to win a trophy and looking at the reasons for their shortcomings. Just a quick note, this is in order of how good the teams were in my opinion. Number 8, Colombia 2014 to 2020. Throughout the 2000s, Colombia were a sleeping giant in football. They were certainly feeling the hangover of exceptional performances in the 90s as they plundered back to mediocrity. However, in the early 2010s, something special started brewing. Soon, deadly strikers emerged like Radamel Falcao and Carlos Bacca, alongside beasts such as Juan Cuadrado and Freddy Guarin, and a midfield maestro in James Rodriguez was uncovered. Colombia's new golden generation had arrived, but unfortunately they disappointed. In the 2014 World Cup, they were beaten by hosts Brazil in the quarter-final, while 4 years later England beat them on penalties in the first knockout round. As for the Copa America, they reached the quarter-final twice in 2015 and 2019, as well as finishing third in 2016, which was a record for them. They were impressive, but they still didn't win anything, and this was largely down to a lot of weak points within their squad. For example, they didn't have that bastion of a defender who could lead them to glory, and they didn't really have that much backup for their key positions. They depended a lot on James, which was evident in their 2018 World Cup exit, and I think they were only a few players away from emerging victorious in either the World Cup or the Copa America. Hopefully though, Colombia can pick themselves back up soon with stars like Luis Diaz emerging. Number 7, Yugoslavia 1990 to 92. With a whole union of countries such as Croatia, Serbia, Bosnia and many more, you'd expect an incredible squad of footballers, and that's exactly what Yugoslavia had in the early 1990s. Their national team boasted exceptional players such as Robert Prosinecki, Dejan Savicevic, Dragan Stojkovic, Predrag Mijatovic, and even a young Davor Suker, which made them a force to be reckoned with. They had a relatively strong 1990 World Cup as they unfortunately bowed out on penalties in the quarter-final against holders Argentina, and hope was then building for Euro 92. Unfortunately, however, political matters had to interfere. Yugoslavia separated in early 1992, meaning they were obviously excluded from the tournament as well as being unregistered as a FIFA nation, and every member state became its own country. Funnily enough, their replacements Denmark actually ended up winning the tournament. However, we can only ponder what could have been had the split just happened a few months later. Number 6, Portugal 2000 to 2006. Portugal were longing for a major international honour, having even failed in the 1960s with the likes of Eusebio at their disposal, and it seemed as though it was their time in the early 2000s. Technical talents like Luis Figo, Rui Costa and Deco began hitting their peak, and a young Cristiano Ronaldo was coming through. At the back, there was also the strength of Vitor Bayer in goal and Ricardo Carvalho. They had a really well-balanced team. They reached the semi-finals at both Euro 2000 and the 2006 World Cup, where they lost to France on both occasions, and their best finish came at Euro 2004 when they shockingly lost the final to Greece. And the less said about their 2002 World Cup group stage exit, the better. There's not really many reasons for their failure except for the fact that, well, Portugal was just genuinely unlucky. They played an even better golden generation in France at both the peak of their powers and when they were sort of petering out. Those were two teams that anyone would struggle to beat. The players also didn't have the best chemistry with one another, and their defeat to Greece proved that a team with better harmony and a stronger mindset could easily overcome them. If Portugal had just a bit more cohesiveness, they could well have won something. Fortunately though, their wait for a trophy ended in 2016, but it was long overdue. Number 5, Belgium 2014 to 2021. Now this team is the one that revived the term golden generation in modern football. The attacking flair of Eden Hazard, Romelu Lukaku and Dries Mertens, the midfield brilliance of Kevin De Bruyne, the rocks at the back of Vincent Kompany and Thibaut Courtois. This Belgian team on paper was enough to send shivers down the spine of anyone who had to face them, yet somehow they still failed. They lost 3 quarter-finals at major tournaments, bowing out in the final 8 at the 2014 World Cup, as well as both Euro 2016 and 2020. Their best finish came in the 2018 World Cup, where they were knocked out in the semi-finals by France but still ended up winning the 3rd place playoff. This of course being their best World Cup finish ever. Given the standard of that team though, those performances were extremely underwhelming. Belgium struggled as they were led by managers who were just incapable of leading a team of that caliber, with Roberto Martinez and Marc Wilmots being the ones ones who spearheaded this team. They also suffered from weakness in some positions, which was especially exposed by their bad luck with injuries, with the likes of Kompany, Vertonghen and De Bruyne showing that their defensive and midfield reserves were incredibly subpar. While Belgium's golden generation is technically still going, most of the players are starting to age and some starting to appear over the hill. The Qatar World Cup truly is the final roll of the dice for this team. Number 4, Netherlands, 1990 to 1998. With seasoned veterans from the Euro 88 squad coupled with eager young talents, the Dutch looked like a force to be reckoned with in the 90s. There was the flair of Mark Overmars, Dennis Bergkamp and Philip Kotsu, while the defence was solid with the De Boer brothers, Edgar Davids and Ronald Koeman. They didn't capitalise on their 1988 momentum as they crashed out in the round of 16 at the 1990 World Cup, and in the next 4 tournaments they reached nothing but 2 semi-finals and 2 quarter-finals. They dazzled with beautiful football and made that one commentator say something crazy about bears, but ultimately they ended up empty-handed. Unfortunately, egos and infighting caused the downfall of the Dutch team, with the Euro 96 squad full of Ajax players both young and old who had just won the Champions League a year prior, and the young ones brought their domestic grievances with them. Apparently the young players were unhappy with how the older players were paid significantly more, and they supposedly caused a lot of drama about it in the camp. Edgar Davids also apparently exchanged some not so friendly words with manager Gus Hiddink after being dropped, and rumours of racial discomfort also spread. This Dutch generation was one of the greatest, but unfortunately egos got in the way of anything special. Number 3, England, 2000 to 2008. Just a few years following the now infamous 1996 song, England's squad actually made it easy to believe that football was coming home. The squad was full of talent, from defenders like John Terry, Ashley Cole and Rio Ferdinand, up to a midfield with the holy trinity of Lampard, Gerrard and Scholes, who would feed balls through to Michael Owen and Wayne Rooney. Unfortunately though, it was a series of quarter-finals, as England lost in the last 8 of both World Cups and the Euros between 2002 and 2006. As if it could actually get worse for this team, they failed to get to the knockout stage at Euro 2000, and the icing on the cake was their failure to qualify for Euro 2008 after Steve McLaren's side were disgracefully knocked out in the playoffs. What was arguably a better team than their World Cup winning side in 1966 were not just underachievers, but they were humiliated. The reason for this was because, as Rio Ferdinand said in 2017, club rivalries got in the way. The egos of the players interfered, much like the Dutch team just a few years prior. Players would band together in small cliques based on their clubs because their rivalries were just so fierce in the league, to the point where a Liverpool player wouldn't talk to a United player. Blame can also be laid at the manager's doorstep for not interfering and trying to create harmony within the squad, as Sven-Goran Eriksson and Steve McLaren watched on in despair in hopes that players would get it together for their games. But alas they didn't, and England is still waiting for their first trophy since 1966. Number 2, Netherlands, 1974 to 1978. Total football was sweeping the beautiful game in the early 70s, with Ajax and Feyenoord dominating in Europe, as the Dutch proved to be masters of a tactic which saw football played at its most beautiful. Realistically, formation didn't really matter as total football relied on fluidity, with players like Johan Cruyff, Johan Neeskens, Arie Haan and Piet Keizer menacing around the opposition box. This Dutch side are arguably the unluckiest on this list, as they finished runners-up in back-to-back World Cups in 1974 and 78, as well as ending up 3rd at Euro 76. They were the ultimate team of nearly men. As I said, the Dutch were very unlucky, coming agonisingly close to sealing the deal in both World Cup finals they played, and star man Johan Cruyff was victim of a kidnapping attempt before the 1978 tournament, meaning he backed out. The Dutch also really struggled mentally, with tactical fragility and cracks appearing in both finals, whereby some of the players sort of abandoned the beautiful football that got them to that point, and bad headlines written about the attitude and antics of the team surely played a role. To this day, Netherlands are still hunting for that elusive first World Cup, with the team losing the most finals in history with 3, and it is entirely possible that their best ever chances may have passed them by. Number 1, Hungary, 1950 to 1956. In the early history of the World Cup, Hungary surprisingly sat atop the big stage with the ever-present big guns like Uruguay, Italy and Germany. They'd reached the final in 1938 and lost, but their team just 16 years later proved to be one of the greatest of all time. The iconic Ferenc Puskás led the line in the 50s, with Zoltán Csibor, Sander Kocsis and Josef Boszczyk around him in a team that scored goals for absolute fun. The mighty Magyars beat England 7-1 and Germany 8-3, yet they still lost the 1954 World Cup final to Germany in what was called the Miracle of Bern, and they'd even failed to qualify just 4 years before. They wiped away some of those tears with a gold medal at the Olympics in 1956, but deep down, who really cares about that? This is arguably one of the greatest teams of all time, and they came up empty-handed on the big stage. There are many reasons for their 1954 final defeat, one of which being the injury of Puskás following the 8-3 victory over the Germans, and he forced himself to start the final against the same opposition, as the feeling was that he should lift the trophy. The Germans are also alleged to have been doping before the game to increase their capacity and ability, which, to be fair, was totally legal at the time. Also, it's not called the Miracle of Bern for no reason. Germany winning that final 3-2 was a shock to everyone, and against all the odds, Hungary's greatest ever team have absolutely nothing to show. Anyway, that's it for the countdown, but I'll just add one more quick little general thing. A major issue with these teams is the weight of expectation placed on them due to their abilities, and this pressure sometimes creates a mental barrier which is very difficult to overcome for some players, especially the young ones. The mental side of international football cannot be understated, given the fact that you've got the hopes of an entire nation on your back. It really is survival of the fittest. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. Thank you very much for watching. If you did enjoy, please be sure to like and subscribe. Let me know what you think of this countdown down below in the comments, and anything you'd like to see on the channel. I'm now in France. Obviously, we've got a new setup going on. I'm in an attic of my grandma's house, which is quite interesting to say the least. I'm sorry, maybe the camera quality might be poorer or the audio quality. That's because I don't have all my stuff with me, but I'm sure it was alright. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.